Hey everybody, and welcome back for another Nouveau video. In this video we're going to take a look at the 4-step modification buttons here and also talk about their relationship to the 4 jacks of the same name over here. Now you've seen me likely clicking these buttons throughout the various videos up to this point, but we haven't actually stopped and talked about what each of them do individually, and that's what we're going to do in this video. So the one that I've probably hit the most is this one here called rand. Rand is short for random or randomize. What rand does is it will write a completely new pattern on whichever track is selected. So you can see I just pushed the button and we got a random track here. If I go and I look at the other tracks, we do not have a random track on any of those. I'm looking here at track 5 and I could hit rand and now we have a random pattern generated here. Now 2 over from rand is one called clear. This does exactly what you think, it wipes everything out. One thing to know about rand is that rand will completely overwrite anything that is present. So you can see here we have these 8 steps and I'm going to hit rand and those went away. Now similar to rand but a little different is the one to the left of it called evolve. So whereas rand will blow away whatever you have here and give you an entirely new pattern, evolve will take what you have and it will give you a subtle modification of that. So let's say for example that I had this pattern here, I just randomly generated it. Now if I hit evolve, what will happen is there you can see we had some very small changes. So this step went away and this step got added. Likewise, I could hit that again. You can see a very subtle change. Evolve again, very subtle change. Now the idea of evolve is similar to rand, but instead of erasing everything that you have, it just makes a very small random change to it. One of the ideas that I had for evolve is that, I don't know about you, but I find myself programming in very common drum patterns frequently without even thinking about it. I just program the same pattern. Evolve is a chance to add a little bit of a surprise or a little bit of a difference, and sometimes I like what's happening with that. Try exploring this on things that you do a lot and you might be surprised with the results. Now the 4th one here called invert will take all of the steps that you have and it will give you the opposite. So you can see here we have this particular pattern. Actually I'm going to change it. So we have this particular pattern and if I hit invert then we get the opposite of that. So you can see that all the steps that I had turned on are now off and then all of the steps that were off are now on. Where invert really becomes the most useful is when you're entering a pattern that has a lot of steps, invert can be a way to get that very quickly. Where I find myself using invert a lot is starting with an entirely blank pattern and hitting invert will give me all of the steps and then I can go and I can reduce steps from there to make an interesting pattern that has a lot of steps but I didn't have to click all of them in. Before we go on to talking about the input jacks over here that are named the same thing, I want to highlight something that's important, which is when you click the buttons down here, you're only modifying the track that you are currently looking at. So for example, if I go over here to track 2, you can see nothing has changed on it. If I hit invert here, we get all of these steps inverted, but none of the other tracks have had that change applied to them. There are trigger input ports for the same operation. So you can see here evolve, random, invert, and clear. And what's different about these inputs is that they will modify all of the tracks for which they are enabled. I'm going to go ahead and add the button 4.2 module by pmoon. This is a free module in the store, by the way, if you would like to get this. It's a very easy way to just generate a gate or a trigger signal from interaction. And it's fantastic when testing things out. So I'm going to patch the output of this first button here. Basically what's going to happen is every time I click it, it will give me a trigger signal. I'm going to patch the output of that into evolve. And when I hit that button, you can see that we had an evolution here on the first track, but also we had an evolution on the 2nd track, the 3rd track, the 4th track, the 7th. We had an evolution on every track when I hit this. So I'm going to do it again. I'm going to click the evolve button and you can see here that all of these tracks have now subtly changed. This works, by the way, for all of them. So if I patched into random, I'm going to hit rand. It's going to use whatever randomization algorithm is set for that track and it will randomize all of them. Now, this can be useful. I haven't talked about what these different algorithms are, but this can be useful. You can go through and you can set up different randomization algorithms. So let's say that I set different algorithm on each of the first 4 tracks here. When I hit this button, I get an entirely new pattern, but it followed all of the randomization algorithms. Likewise, invert will invert everything. And, as you probably already guessed, clear will clear everything. Now you might say, that's cool, but what if I only want to cause that action to happen on certain tracks? And there is a per track setting for this. So down here in the LCD, make sure that you have track selected and change your setting. Click over to the right a number of times and you will see that there is one called evolve trigger, random trigger, invert trigger, and clear trigger. Now all 4 of these settings work the same. There are 2 values for these settings, apply and ignore. Apply means that whenever a trigger comes in on that jack, it will allow that action to happen to that track, and ignore is the opposite. It will not do anything. So for example here, I'm going to put evolve to ignore on track 1, and we will turn all of the steps on. I'm going to set evolve to ignore on track 2, but I'm going to leave evolve as apply for all other tracks. When I hit this button here, we just sent a trigger to evolve. You can see nothing happened on track 1, nothing happened on track 2, but we got an evolution on all of these other tracks. Likewise here with clear, I'm going to do the same thing. Let's change that out. So I'm going to say ignore and ignore. So I'm going to hit clear, cleared everything out, but you can see track 2 and track 1 has stayed exactly the same. Now I went ahead and I loaded up a preset to give you a demo of how you can cleverly use these trigger settings. In this particular preset, which by the way I'm using the init 808 preset, what is set up here for you is you can see the randomization algorithm is already set to something that matches that particular instrument. And if I was to hit play, well, we're not hearing anything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the 16th track as a trigger track. That is, whenever the step is high on this track, it will cause a new pattern to be generated on all of the other tracks. So let's set this up with, I'm going to go with motif for this. Yep. Okay, so whenever a step is encountered on one of these, we're going to randomly generate new patterns on every other track. And I don't want this one to get changed as well, so let's go ahead and turn off random trigger on this track. All right, so there's 2 things we did here, right? Which is we generated a pattern here on the 16th track, and we said that the 16th track is going to ignore triggers. I'm going to patch the output of the 16th track into random. You can see here we've got nothing. We've got a step to start us out with. Let's hit play. All right, so that probably sounds crazy chaotic right now. I could mute some of these things to give us a little bit more of a mellow sound. But one of the ideas there that I want you to take away is that we are almost getting into generative territory because we're using a track to trigger randomization on other tracks. And in that way, we can almost not predict what's going to happen. Now I'm going to slow this down because I think that may have been changing a little fast. Let's reset this and try again. Now keep in mind, I didn't program any of this. This is just clever patching is giving us basically drum loops that are dynamic and changing. They're ever evolving, and they're probably never going to be the same ever again in the history of the world. we wanted to slow down the rate of change, we could give this one either a larger division, or we could take out some of these steps. We could also generate a new pattern here if we wanted to change on a different rate as well.